Okay, hi everyone, welcome. Thank you for joining us. I'm Bert Dizon on behalf of the RISE Education Committee. Welcome to our webinar today, After the Crash, Cell Phone Forensics. Please note that our webinars are recorded and will be available usually the next day on our YouTube channel. So if you have anyone who missed today and would like to still catch the webinar, please refer them to that location. I would give a long, lengthy introduction of our speaker today, but I don't think that he needs that from me. I'll let him introduce himself. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Lars Daniel with Invista Forensics.
Bert, thank you so much. And thank you all for joining us today. So we talk about cell phone forensics and the impact they can have in accident investigations. And we're going to talk a lot about motor carrier accidents in particular. When you think about your cell phone today, it's kind of funny to even call it a phone. Think about what you do with your phone. This is your personal concierge. It lets you know if you have time to go and get coffee before you go to the office, the directions you need to get anywhere you need to go in the world. It has 5 chips in it. One of those is a GPS chip in modern phones that precisely locates you, so you can get that precise location with your Uber, and the rest, your health data is sorted into that from wearable devices and more. We're going to look at these types of evidence and also how we can use that evidence in actual cases and use real case examples to explore this today. So that's our introduction as we get started. A little bit about myself, as Bert said. I am the practice leader of digital forensics at Invista Forensics. I've written 2 books in the field of digital forensics, including Digital Forensics for Legal Professionals and Digital Forensics Trial Graphics, which is more for other experts in my field. And I have a 3rd book coming out here soon. A little over halfway done with it. It was supposed to be a short book and it's almost 200 pages, so it is what it is. But this one is going to be designed specifically for experts in the law, so legal professionals and risk professionals. So it's a plain language guide to what is data, what is digital evidence, and what is digital forensics and how can we use it. I've testified 37 times in state and federal courts, qualifying as an expert in computer, cell phone, digital, photo, video, and audio forensics. And I've also qualified in the state courts of Singapore as a video forensics expert. But mostly what I want to tell you about as we talk about this and as a way of introduction is also what is digital forensics and what is a digital forensics examiner is my team. I've got experts, 11 experts on staff located in North Carolina, South Carolina, Virginia, and Texas. We continue to expand and add new examiners as we find the right fit and the right experts. When you're talking about digital forensics, the experts don't come from traditional forensic engineering backgrounds. It's a different field with different expertise. You need to think more like, what are cops doing? What is law enforcement? What is the government doing? And that's also where I hire out of. So my entire staff, excluding myself and one other expert, are all former law enforcement coming from areas such as the Secret Service, Homeland Security, and high-tech crime task forces. Combined, my experts and I have over 400 expert testimonies in a variety of different areas related to digital evidence, including the ones I mentioned, as well as Google geolocation, cell site location, cryptocurrency, and more. So that's the types of experts that we have. The training and the way that an expert comes about in digital forensics is different. A lot of it is getting specialized training in the tools and technology and in digital forensics through third-party organizations. So when you hire out of the government, a lot of times they've received a tremendous amount of training from the government through government grant programs and the rest. You bring them on and they have all that expertise, both in investigations and in the forensic side of things. All right, now that we're ready to go, let's get into the details and actually start with a case example. I like to start with this case example in particular because what we're going to see are snippets from the plaintiff expert's report. And this one we were retained by the attorney representing the trucking company to assist in this case. And the expert the plaintiff brought to bear to try to say an accident was caused by the driver distraction on the behalf of the truck driver, okay? So the evidence they used to say that the driver was distracted, and the reason I start with this one is they used evidence from multiple sources. A holistic approach is what they attempted to do. One, they used call detail records, which are like a super phone bill, okay? Then they also used the driver's logs, combine those together, which we'll see in a minute, to do what's called a lifestyle analysis, and then data extracted directly from the cell phone itself. Now we're going to start with the data from the cell phone itself, okay? The first claim they made was that the driver was on the phone and actively using it at the time of the accident. The reason they said this was because the album cover changed from one artist to another in iHeartRadio leading up to the accident moments before. Now, let me ask you a question. If you've used Spotify or WhatsApp or iHeartRadio or any type of Apple Music, any music application, what happens when it switches from one artist to another? Did you have to make the album cover change, or does it do it automatically when it switches from one artist to the next? It happens automatically, right? So we showed that, we tested it, we proved it. That goes out the window. They can't use that. That's shown to be an automated function of the app and has nothing to do with the user. Next, though, they took the driver's logs like you see here, combined those with the phone records in an attempt to create the following: a driver's log versus phone records analysis to create this, which is a sleep gap analysis for the driver. So, for example, on Sunday here, June 8th, we would see that the largest windows of time the driver could sleep, according to the plaintiff, would be 2 hours and 23 minutes, an hour and 30, and an hour and 16 minutes. So this odd phasal sleeping system, which would be highly problematic, right? You don't need a truck driver on the road with that little bit of sleep and a phasal sleeping system like that. However, with digital evidence and in digital forensics, a lot of times the devil truly is in the details. And that is the case in this particular example, because this plaintiff expert included incoming activity is activity you have to be awake for. Now, let me ask you a question. How often have you gone to bed to wake up to a bunch of emails and text messages, perhaps even emergency messages or whatever else? You were not awake for that. You cannot include incoming activity as a part of this analysis, only activity that is user generated or something a user is doing from the phone. So when you pull all that out, all that incoming activity, this driver had a completely normal sleep schedule, completely in compliance with how he needed to be doing. So this was a good outcome for the defense in this case. Now, we're going to talk about forensic extractions and how we get data off of cell phones, okay? Following this, we're going to look at a case example that illustrates the importance of this on a case where we were retained by the plaintiff and the outcomes that can happen if you don't do this correctly. So we're going to lead into a case example, but first we have to cover some technical background on the different types of acquisitions to get a feel for why all of it matters in the first place. So a few things. When we're dealing with cell phones, there are unique issues when it comes to the preservation of that data. First, the phone must be isolated from networks. That means you need to isolate it from the internet and isolate it from the cellular network so it cannot send or receive new data, okay? That has multiple reasons. One is the ability to remotely wipe the device. And second, older phones can have issues too, which we'll talk about on the next slide. Well, one of the ways we do this in digital forensics is the use of Faraday technology. So that bag that cell phone in is called a Faraday bag. Now, what that bag does is it's radio frequency shielded. And in effect, what it allows it to do is it prevents that phone from giving any information at all. Okay, so it cannot receive or send any data from a cellular system or from a Wi-Fi. It's isolated, preserving the data on it exactly as it existed when it went into that bag. Your microwave works on similar technology, right? So you put your hot pocket in the microwave, you go to microwave your lunch. Hopefully it's not, frozen in the middle, molten hot on the outside like it tends to be. That's a different type of risk you would have to encounter. But when you put that lunch in there and you microwave your food, what it's doing is it's containing all those microwaves inside of a Faraday cage so it microwaves your food and not your head, right? That's exactly what it's doing there. Similar technology with a Faraday bag. Now, when we're doing this, and the reason we need to do this, one is the ability to remotely wipe. I've had cases where law enforcement or other experts have taken, or other custodians have taken these phones into their charge. They could be in the back of the police cruiser and it's not placed into airplane mode or anything to protect it, and it's remotely wiped on the way to wherever it's headed. Okay, so that's a problem. Second, if you have a less sophisticated phone, some of your throwaway or pay-as-you-go phones, as new data comes into that phone, and it could delete the oldest data and make room for the new, which potentially could not be recovered. Either way, even if it is recoverable, that data is changing from a perfect snapshot in time of as it existed when it was collected, because you're allowing data to transfer on that device, okay? So what should you do if you have to collect a phone? What I want you to do is place it into airplane mode and power it off. That's the best thing that you can do that will keep you protected in these scenarios. But what happens too often? What happens too often is somebody is thumbing through the phone. Okay, I call it thumb forensics. That's the idea of just thumbing through to see what the last activity was. And that could be somebody from the State Highway Patrol looking at a phone at an accident scene. That could be anybody, okay? That can be very problematic in certain scenarios. It isn't always, because a lot of times we can determine when those activities occur in the rest, which we'll see later on as I show you actual slides and examples from the actual forensic hardware and software itself. But the best case is always to power it off, preserve the phone, have it in airplane mode before you do that, make sure wireless is off and the rest, because you can be on a plane and connected to the internet, so on and so forth. You want to make sure that you turn the wireless off, airplane mode on, powered off. That's the best way to preserve it, because that gives you the ability to say that we know nothing has been changed. It was collected, protected correctly in the beginning. Now, the actual forensic extraction types and the names that they're called. We're going to use the actual names that you will get if you got a forensic report. So that's what we're going to see here. There's a logical extraction. And what we're talking about here is getting data from the actual physical phones itself. So we have to have access to the phones. With a logical extraction, what you're getting is you're getting all that still existing data that exists on the phone that you can see as a normal user. What you can see, what you see on the screen and operate with, we're getting all that information. This does not get access to what's called deleted data or unallocated space on the phone. We'll cover that in a moment. But what you need to understand now is that even if we can't get that level of detail, we can't get all that data, we can still recover deleted data. That's because many of the applications that run on your phone operate on a database system. Okay, so I'm going to draw a picture with my hands here on my screen so you can see what I'm talking about. So we have all the data inside of a messaging application, okay, in this box, all right? In the beginning is a list of where all the messages live, and the rest is the storage area where they go, okay? When you mark or tell that phone to delete a message or it automatically deletes, what it can do is it just marks where this message lives, don't show it to the user anymore, okay? It hasn't deleted anything. So in effect, what happens in forensics is that we rebuild that connection, rebuild where it lives to the database, back to where the message is, and we recover that message. So even deleted messages to a user are recoverable even with the lowest level or simplest type of extraction on cell phone forensics. Next, we have a file system extraction. I'm going to talk about advanced in a moment, but listen, a file system extraction gets all that data you get in a logical, all the still existing data and more deleted files, more raw materials like things like biometric data, location data, health data, and other information related to applications that could be incredibly useful in cases. Then there's advanced file system extraction. Once again, we're going to talk about that later, but that is now industry standard. The reason being is that modern smartphone encryption makes it have to be the industry standard. We'll come back to that. There's a better extraction method than that, and that's called a physical extraction, okay? And that's what we see right here. A physical extraction gets everything from a phone. That's getting still existing data, data that's in that file system with the biometric, health, other application data, and it's getting access to what's called unallocated space. Unallocated space is kind of like the trash bin of data, where we have to go in and sort and dig through to find evidence. Now, it's much simpler and more automated than that with forensics, but this is where you're carving for all the images, trying to recover those, and you have to visually review them to see what they are, or you're trying to recover messages or things via keywords. That's because this data has been truly deleted in a sense, not gone, but what it has is that database entry that tells the phone where all the files live, like we talked about, like in a messaging application. What's occurred here is that we have all the list that says where they live. Here's our storage area where all those messages are, or all that data. This could be files, this could be anything. Let's say we have a file right here. The database entry has been deleted, right? That no longer exists, but we still have the file which could exist as an entirety in the storage area on the phone. So what has to happen is that you have to try to carve for that forensically, try to recover that out of the unallocated space, and you can recover that data, okay? So that provides extensive ability to recover deleted data. However, the issue with physical extraction is that modern smartphone encryption technology makes it so that it is not possible for almost all modern smartphones. You have to crack the code, so to speak, to get access to that in more advanced data. That's what an advanced file system extraction is. Once again, we'll come back to that in our case study because that's really, really important, especially in accident cases like this, where you need to know down to the second and in between the seconds what is occurring on that phone, because the data relates to driver distraction or claims of driver distraction, whether it actually happened or not. Now, there's also situations like this. This is from a motor carrier accident case. This phone right here, this crispy critter, all burned up, extra crispy. You see that? We can crack it off, the case off, take the chip out, and get the data directly from the chip. So even if the phone is damaged like this, it does not mean that data is beyond recovery. Getting the chip can be as good as getting the phone. So you can get the data like this from it. Now, you may have heard that like an Apple phone is encrypted at a hardware level. You can't do that with an Apple phone. We just can't take an iPhone, crack it open, pull the chip out, and get the data, because it is protected in that way. But there's also this thing called joint task action group. These are these terms, chip off, joint task action group. That's the terms for this, actually, the technology and the tools used in forensics, if you ever hear those again. But here's the important part to understand. even though we can't get the data directly from a chip on an iPhone, we can take a damaged iPhone, crack it open, take the chip out, put it in the same model of iPhone, put the screen back on, and get the data that way. So that data is even still accessible. So just because something looks damaged beyond the ability to recover something, understand that that's not necessarily the case. It might be recoverable. Now, some labs, like the lab that I'm at, we were one of the first labs to get this technology. We have the same technology as law enforcement and the government, where we can crack passcodes. So if you saw, and this is not about politics, saw the whole Trump thing that happened, the assassination attempt, they were able to get into the shooter's phone after a little bit of time. We have that same technology. Okay, we have the same ability to get into passcode locked phones as the government does. So if you have a phone like that, somebody forgets the passcode, it's a decedent or something like that, it does not mean that data cannot be recovered. The passcode might be able to be broken and that data recovered from that device. Now, this is going to be important. I'm going to explain to you how you can do these too, because this could be a real issue in a case if it's not done correctly. So you're going to learn right now how to do what's called a manual examination and how to protect yourself from people like me in court and the rest. I'm going to apologize now. My slides are auto-advancing for some reason. So if you see me keep clicking back and forth, that's what that is. But a last resort in digital forensics for examiners is to do what's called a manual examination. We don't want to do these unless we have to. One, it's incredibly tedious to do it in a forensic level because you have to capture all the data on the device or a significant amount of it. But it also doesn't produce a mathematical hash value. Okay, so what does that mean? Why do I care? And all these other we've looked at, whether it's logical, file system, physical, all these, we're collecting that data. That data, once it's collected, has a mathematical hash algorithm running against all the data, okay? That produces a unique number that is like DNA. It's like a fingerprint, but better than DNA and better than a fingerprint in the sense that two things having the same value are impossible, more or less, okay? It looks at all the data on the device and creates this numeric value. If I take that phone and power it up or do anything to it, it could be a computer, anything where I've created a forensic copy or forensic image, and I have that number, anything happens at all, that will be a totally different number. So we have a perfect snapshot in time verified by that hash value. That's our digital DNA that proves that this is a correct and good forensic copy and that it has not been tampered with, okay? The manual examination, you're not going to get that because what is a manual examination? It's literally what it sounds like. It's manual. You are scrolling through the phone and you're taking pictures of what you see on the screen. However, pictures are not enough. And I have a recent article on that on my newsletter on LinkedIn you can subscribe to if you follow me on there. And I'll have a QR code at the end going into this in detail. But with a manual examination, what you have to do is you need to take pictures of the evidence item with a separate camera, okay? You never take screenshots on an original evidence item like a phone because you're now creating new data that can overwrite other data. You're interacting with files. You don't want to do that, okay? You want to take pictures with a separate camera, but the entire time you're doing that, you have to have a video recording from the time you pull out of evidence, power it on, do your pictures, power it off, and put it away. That video acts as your verification that you have not created, deleted, modified, or changed anything intentionally or unintentionally in the process of doing your pictures and examination. So how can you do this? You're not always going to have the ability to get a whole phone. What if it's a witness? What if it's a bystander or a custodian who has one message or one email you need to collect, okay, from their phone? How should you do it? What I want you to do is just bring that custodian in for an interview, have them place that phone on the table, and you're going to take your iPhone and take a picture of that message. But when you're doing that picture, you have an associate or somebody who works for you over your shoulder, and what they're doing is they're taking a video of the entire time you're doing that. That's your verification that you haven't changed or modified or done anything to that data. That's also going to protect you from someone like me who's testified on this exact issue multiple times, being able to say that you can't verify this. We can't tell if it's a fake. We can't tell if it's been modified. We can't tell if it's been changed in this way, that way, or another way. Okay, that's how you protect yourself. So we've looked at the acquisition methods. Now we're going to look at a case study that shows what happens when you don't follow those best practices, all right? So in this case, it's May of 2021. In this case, just wrapped up recently. You have a box truck that works for a Fortune 500 company going down the road, okay? And they collide into a maintenance vehicle that's kind of on the side of the road with a flat tire. It's a landscaping vehicle. The driver is rendered paraplegic, and then you have 3 other people in the vehicle also hurt. The case we're looking at now is only for the driver of the plaintiff's vehicle, okay? So that occurs. Now, this Fortune 500 company makes products for vehicles. So most of the cases they deal with are product liability cases. So what do? They call the firm they always use. and they bring on product liability attorneys to handle what's truly a personal injury case. Okay. I think that was one of the first missteps. It's an excellent firm, but it's a boutique firm that handles very specific types of cases. So, as a product liability case might do, or attorneys dealing with the kind of cases they deal with, they bring on a certain type of expert that's not necessarily a digital forensics expert, which we'll get to in a minute. Well, defense does anticipate that there's going to be a lawsuit. Okay. So what do? They bring on an e-discovery vendor to collect the data from the phone to preserve everything. All right. Well, a short time later, after this has occurred, the plaintiff finds an attorney. They make a $10 million demand. Settlement negotiations are unsuccessful. The plaintiff attorney brings that personal injury lawsuit. Okay. So that's kind of our timeline of events. The defense at this point then subpoenas the driver's call detail records. Call detail records are like a super phone bill that contain much more than a phone bill would, including calls that won't show up. So for example, if you have a call that lasts less than a minute, that will not show up necessarily in a phone bill, but it will show up in a call detail record because that didn't last long enough to be chargeable. Even on an unlimited plan, most phone records work on a 1 minute iteration. So if it doesn't last a minute, it's not going to show up. Call detail records, they will, and much more data, including the cell site that was used. So you can get location data, historic location data, and more. Okay. So they get those records. They provide those to the plaintiff in discovery. Now, the discovery company retained by the defense performs a manual examination following this. The manual examination is incomplete. They only take select photos, not everything that mattered in the time frame. So not all the messages, not all the emails in that time frame. They also didn't make the video. That's their first misstep. Okay. Well, at this point, the plaintiff calls us to retain us on the case. Now, I've testified for the defense and prosecution in criminal cases, the defense and plaintiff in civil cases. We're an independent lab. We're an independent experts. So we work through calls first. So this is my reminder. You want us on there, just call us first. Okay. I have preferences on who I work for, but I have to work for whoever calls me. Okay. So we compared those call detail records with the manual examination photos, and we can tell immediately there's been intentional deletion of data because there's records that exist in the call detail records that do not exist on the phone. At this point, we have explained to our attorney and educated them on cell phone forensics and what's possible to recover, all the stuff you're going to see in a little bit. And we informed our attorney, we need the actual physical phone itself. We need to see that phone. We need access to it so we can get the data off of it. The defense chooses to comply, and they drop the phone off at one of our labs. The driver, fortunately, lived near one of my labs, so they're able to do that pretty easily. But on that very same day, the defense attorney calls us and insists that we had to return the phone immediately. It's taking longer than we said it would to get the data off the phone and the rest. Other reasons like that are stated because the driver uses this phone. They need it to operate. They need it right now. This is a phone they use every day. Well, we were unable to extract the phone data because the phone looked like this, okay? The screen was severely damaged, cracked to the point where if you slid your finger across the top, you're gonna have to go get stitches at the ER. And the port for charging and data transmission was broken. So you couldn't charge it and you couldn't transfer data off of it. So I'm not entirely sure how this phone was still in use at this point, but allegedly it was. So out of abundance of caution, we returned the phone because we could not get a hold of our attorney, okay? A short time later, after that, we received 2 cell phone extractions that the e-discovery company performed that were done a long time early, an entire year earlier. Okay. So this is just now coming discovery, even those have been sitting around for a year. The first extraction they did was called a Bluetooth logical extraction. This is the lowest level extraction, totally inappropriate to perform in this time with the technology that we have these days. What you see, the blue items are things that it would capture. All the grayed out are data it can't capture in Bluetooth. Think of how slow Bluetooth is to transfer data, right? Even if you're using Bluetooth speakers to listen to music, that music is compressed down. So you're not getting the full experience. You're not getting what's called a hi-fi audio experience. That's why even like a record player in a house sounds so much better. Like, what am I listening to? I've never heard this song this way. That's because it's high fidelity. When you transmit via Bluetooth, it's got to compress that data even in what you listen to, so it's not as high quality. You'll notice some highs and lows, and the mids kind of get a little muddier if you're a bit of an audiophile versus listening on a record player or a high definition recording or something like that with wired headphones. Big difference, okay? Well, it's certainly true when you're trying to get gigs and gigs of data off of a phone. You're not going to get everything, and this is a very low-level extraction. Next, they did the following. This doesn't make any sense. There's no name for this type of extraction, but here's what they did. They uploaded the data they got in that Bluetooth extraction to the cloud then downloaded that onto another cell phone, like an exemplar phone, a test phone. Then they extracted the data from the test phone into a logical extraction. And I'm confused even trying to explain it every time because it doesn't make any sense. You're going to get the same data from the Bluetooth. This doesn't create a better extraction by doing that. But that's what they did. So the data we have at this point, in this case, we have those call detail records, right? We have the pictures from the incomplete manual examination and 2 incomplete cell phone extractions that are not best practices and the rest, okay? Now, real quick, what are best practices in digital forensics? Well, when we're talking about cell phones, it's to get the most data possible from that device if that case requires it, okay? These types of cases do. What happens in situations where you can't extract data? This could be antiquated accounting software that you can't get the data by just copying the whole computer. You have to go through the system to get it and whatever else, or like a DVR surveillance unit, something like that. When you have data like that where you can't do a forensic copy, you have to document like crazy, first of all. And second of all, if it's the only way to get the data, that's best evidence because it's the only way to get it. So there are situations like that that arise. That's not the case in this scenario because there are much better ways to do that. So now it's 2023, 2 years since the accident occurred. The defense decides to depose 2 of my expert. First, my expert is former Homeland Security. They depose him. He's the one who received the phone into our lab, so he explains the condition of the phone we got it, and he testifies that a proper extraction method could have gotten much more data. Then they depose one of my technical leads, who is a real industry leader in cell phone and location forensics. He's on the USV Chatry case and some other big ones related to like Google geofence data and more right now that are keep climbing in the courts. But he testifies that there absolutely, without a doubt, is intentional deletion of data. We can prove it between the call detail records and those manual examination pictures. Also testifies that there's a huge amount of missing data because the extraction type wasn't performed that should have been done to get the data off the phone, okay? At the end of the deposition, the defense chooses, they understand that they got to give us this phone again, so they do. They provide the phone, and 72 hours after we receive the phone, now that we know the condition it's in, my technical lead cracks it open, repairs the phone. This is the actual phone in this case. So we repaired the corrosion damage, the water damage, repaired the controller board, and recovered the data off of it, okay? Now, I'm going to show you the data. We're going to look at the case and actually play it out here in a second. But once again, a quick recap. Logical extractions. They still get existing data and some of that deleted that's in the database form. Then you have file system gets all that and some more biometric health location. Physical gets everything, but modern smartphone encryption makes it so you can't do that on most phones. That's why advanced file system extractions are absolutely critical in motor carrier accident cases. We're going to see examples of the data why in a minute, okay? That was previously only available for government and law enforcement use. Now, some labs have that are private like mine, okay? It's the new standard for extraction for iPhone and Android devices. It gets the most amount of data and specific user data that's incredibly useful and necessary in motor carrier accident cases. Why is not everyone using this? It's pretty simple. It's a cost issue. This technology is expensive. This technology is not handed out to everyone. Vendors don't like to give access to this level of technology just to anyone who calls with a number. So it's a significant vetting process to get these tools and technology. But most of it truly is cost for some of these labs getting it. We're one of the larger private labs that handles this type of work with 11 experts. That doesn't sound huge, but in digital forensics, that's a lot for one lab. And we have the ability to get better deals because we're buying more equipment, right? Normal type idea like that. So that's kind of one of the situations that's going on there in the industry right now. But you're required to get this level of extraction today, or you risk claims of spoliation because here's the issue. If someone does a lower level extraction and that phone's returned to use by the driver, you've now prevented me from having the ability to get all the data as it existed in a perfect snapshot in time when it was collected, because it's gone back out in use. I don't know what's happened to that data anymore. And if all we're left with is just the extraction, a lower level extraction done by that other expert, we're missing a lot of data, right? So I have a lot of arguments I can make as an expert related to the inability to do a complete and full analysis and independent analysis because that data wasn't provided to me or allowed for me to get access to that phone to get the data in the way it needed to be done. So why advanced file system? You see that arrows here, access to decode third-party application data, chat conversations, email attachments, and deleted data. What does all that mean? That means all the good stuff, which we're going to look at right now. That's all the good stuff, putting fingers on screens type data, okay? So here's our background information on the case, and I'll show you the timeline. 6:10 to 6:20 a.m. That's the timeline we're allowed to look at. We're not allowed to look at everything on this phone by court order. We had a 10-minute window we could look at, okay? And plaintiff have both agreed that that was the accident time. The defense did not dispute this time or have any issues with it. Remember, they had confidence in their case because there's no activity in the call detail records from their review. There's nothing in the manual examinations. And then those extractions, the e-discovery company performed, had no data in there either in that window of 10 minutes. However, here's what we recovered, okay? Now I want you to remember too, that it's been 2 years by the time we extracted the data from this phone. It's been sitting 2 years allegedly in use by the driver when we got all this. So here's our start and end time, 6:10, 6:20, and our collision in the middle in red. That's at 6:14:30. The first deleted message we recovered is at 6:12. The driver of the truck is creating a kick messenger screenshot. So they receive a message, click 2 buttons at the same time, like your home lock button, something like that, create that screenshot, okay? So you have fingers touching the screen or fingers touching the device. Then we have a kick messenger saved at 6:14, 30 seconds before the accident, okay? So this is touch and holding the image, selecting a default save location. So once again, user interactions needed to do that function on the phone itself. The 3 seconds before the accident, we have another saved image, and this was even more in depth because what they did here is they selected the message and clicked to save it to a particular folder in a folder structure, okay? So that's multiple steps needed to do that. That last message, I can't show you the actual picture of it from this case, but these guys were sending back and forth. If you play like Magic the Gathering or like Pokemon or these card games, how they have like a little character on it and it says something and it like plays a spell. Well, one was like a conversation started, and this message he sent was conversation ended with a chalk outline body with like blood around it. And it said conversation killed. Okay. It was the picture he sent 3 seconds before the accident where a gentleman was rendered paraplegic. Now, remember, $10 million was the ask, okay? This ended up being a $35 million verdict for the plaintiff. Now, both the defense and plaintiffs in this case are clients of mine. And I've had chances to talk to them, and I've anonymized details about it to protect everyone involved. That's a real number, though. That's the real number, 35 million. I've talked to both of them, and the defense said, wow, we wish we had known this earlier on because we would have settled for much less than this, right? And the plaintiff said, look, if they had been reasonable, we would have settled for half that. We would have settled for 5 million, right? That's a lot of money, but it's not $35 million. So a lot of times the best thing for the defense is what I'm trying to illustrate here in a lot of ways is just knowing upfront, knowing early what happened so we can make good decisions, right? They didn't have the data they needed to make the right decision at that time, which led to a nuclear verdict in this case. So all that data we're talking about from the advanced extraction, let's look at some actual data that comes from cell phones and why this matters so much. Now, some of the data we're talking about here, not necessarily in the case we just looked at, we can recover a lot even after many years have passed on phones, but some data is truly ephemeral. It's going to be there, then it's going to be gone, usually at about a 30-day rollover period. So that data is rolling and then it's gone. Okay. That's not always the case, but for a lot we're going to see here, that is the case. And this is some of the data that's most valuable, hence why it's really important to get that driver's phone as soon as possible and have it preserved. Okay. One is extremely precise location data. And this is perishable. It doesn't exist on the phone forever. It's engineering data that rolls over. But this getting speed and velocity and other information that's incredibly useful in a case. And what you're about to see is an example from that, okay? So that data we just saw, we can plot it on a map. And what we have here in this case is a plaintiff vehicle retained by the defense in this one, plaintiff vehicle riding down the road, and you're not seeing the actual vehicle on the street here. This is a Google Maps view just showing the times and points from the phone. Those are the speeds. So you see from the bottom right up to the top left, they're going about 75 miles an hour up until you see that 1, 2, 3. And that's where the collision occurs. This plaintiff is driving an Escalade down the road, big old Escalade, and there's like a John Deere tractor, like a legit piece of farm equipment on the side, and they hit that. And when they hit it, they're going 73 miles an hour. When they see the stop, they start hitting braking, and then they hit that thing at 54 miles an hour, right? Because they're going way too fast. But here's the case in this one. they didn't have this phone data at first. They only had the event data recorder data, the CDR data, and that data was being contested as inaccurate. However, the phone data that we're seeing here matched it exactly. So then we had two independent sources verifying that speed. So we had a good outcome for the defense in this case. We're able to verify it from the phone data, two independent sources verifying that speed. Here's another example, and I'm going to move down the list here as we see this, and you can see my mouse cursor. I'm going to use that as I scroll down and explain these. We can tell what your fingers are doing on the phone down to the second now, okay? So lock device status, you've locked your phone, the display turns off, display turns back on, you unlock your device. Mobile SMS, you open your messaging application, okay? And that doesn't mean you're typing a message, it just means you're in it, looking at it. You don't have to type one for us to see it anymore. So we're just seeing that you're in it. Then they move over to YouTube, and they're in the YouTube application that you see here. Then they go into their preferences, like their settings. They change the audio output, so they change it to go from a speakerphone to a big Jambox by Jawbone earpiece. So we can see that activity down to the second. Here's even more examples of that. We have the device is locked, then it's unlocked, and they're moving. We have data coming from the health data over here. You see them moving around. They plug the device in. Display goes off, unplug. Were they sleeping at this time? That's the type of thing that you could use to correlate with other information in a case, holistically approaching this from like an investigator, an examiner, and other information and discovery. We see display on and off and so forth, right? What about one more? Let's look at one more example. You're in your mail, your Apple Mail, just looking at mail. You don't even making a mail. They change orientation to landscape mode. Then they're going to the messaging application, change it to orientation to vertical, so we can see that here. Then they're in their messaging again. Then they open their camera, unlock the device, right? You can see all that activity down to the second. So what does this look like in an actual case? Here's an actual case example of this. We're retained by the defense. We're examining the plaintiff's phone in this case. So in the plaintiff's phone, it's from an actual report. We see they're in the Waze app. They exit that. They open their messages. They send a message. They open Waze. They exit Waze. They open Iron Tribe Fitness. They exit Iron Tribe Fitness. They open Waze again. They get a notification from Iron Tribe Fitness that they've been removed from a class. They exit Waze. They open Iron Tribe Fitness again. The collision happens 9 seconds later, okay? They disconnect the lightning cable, turn the display off, exit the fitness app, and lock the screen. So we can see down to the second what's happening on that phone. With applications, you don't have to be generating data for that to occur. Here's another example that's a really new one that gives such a good example of this type of data, and another reason not necessarily to trust what you're getting from the accident reports and information like that, okay? In this case, we got a 17-year-old girl who's driving, her 14-year-old sister's in the car with her. We're examining the plaintiff's phone once again on this, retained by the defense in this case for the trucking company. She tells law enforcement, I have both hands on the wheel, 10 and 2. I'm not eating fries. I'm not on my phone. I'm not doing anything. I'm a perfect driver, okay? That's the story in a nutshell, what she tells law enforcement. Now, the accident time, according to the accident report and state troopers, was 10:59, okay? Well, law enforcement got this phone. The family attorney allowed them to have the phone to examine it, and they didn't find any activity at all in that time window. 10 and 2, not eating fries, not on the phone, not putting on makeup. Everything's great. No distraction, right? Well, the phone created an artifact related to an accident notification. The phone saw that there had been an accident at 10:43:49. We recovered that artifact when we got the phone. And then when you corrected the time to when the accident actually occurred versus the police report, here's the activity on her phone. She unlocks her phone at 10:29, then leading on, she hits pause, play, pause, play, pause, play in her music app. Then at 10:42:39, she connects a Bluetooth speaker, like one you carry to the beach. So she's got a portable Bluetooth speaker. She's in her settings 50 seconds before the accident, and she's connecting a Bluetooth speaker to her phone. Then she hits play at 10:42:58, and then 40 seconds later, she gets a Snapchat message. Then 11 seconds after that, she gets in the collision with the truck, okay? She's on that phone all the time leading up to the accident, nonstop. From the time she gets in the vehicle till the time she hits that truck, she is on and off that phone consistently, using it every 30 seconds or less. She's doing something on that phone, okay? So that paints a very different story than I didn't touch the phone at all. And it was all because the accident time was incorrect. Now, luckily, our digital tools like this, our devices we're carrying around, are creating more artifacts and evidence that can show us accident time as well, like this. Here's another example. We examined a plaintiff's phone, and this one retained by the defense. If you notice down here, you're going to see 3 pictures. Okay. And this is from an actual case. You see an image, an image, and an image. This is a plaintiff riding in their car behind an 18-wheeler. Okay. They're in their car and they have a pill bottle next to them, and they're trying to take a picture of the pill bottle so they can upload it to their pharmacy application to fill their prescription. The first picture is blurry, so it's no good. So they decide to take a next picture. They take the next one, blurry, no good. They take that third picture and it's perfect. So they go to click upload. And when they go to click upload, they go into the back of that 18-wheeler, are decapitated, and die instantaneously. Now it's a sad case, but was the truck driver distracted? No, this was the plaintiff using the phone. They were distracted, not the driver of this truck. Good outcome for the defense. So what are these artifacts we're talking about that come from an advanced extraction and why we care about it? Okay. First of all, I just want you to understand how much data. There's so much data on the modern smartphone. It's ridiculous. This is one phone. We're looking at only 6 months out of many months of data from this phone. We have 143,000 artifacts. If you look over here, you're seeing screenshots to the right from cell phone forensic software, different types of data that had been recovered. And everywhere you see a red indication, that's a deleted, recovered piece of content. So we've got deleted messages, chats, emails, Bluetooth devices that were removed from the device, network connections, which could provide very precise location data, and more. Okay. Once again, just from one cell phone, this is just messaging and chat stuff. Okay. We have about 16,000 messages, 81,000 chats, 70,000 WhatsApp, 8,500 native messages. Those would be like the green ones that come across on your phone, things like that. Just a huge amount of data. But there's also very specific data. Before we get to that, a couple questions that I get that I want to answer. What about editing and unsending messages? Yes, you can do that. No, you will not necessarily be able to tell on your device as a user. But in forensics, by comparing the multiple databases, we can see when that occurs in many instances. Not all the time, but a lot of times we can see that a message was edited after the fact, or that the message was deleted, because we can recover those, right? We're recovering that information by comparing things. A lot of times we can see if a message has been edited or unsent through a cell phone forensics examination. And what about really old data, right? Well, here's such an example. You see that 2013? These are Facebook instant messages that were sent using Messenger on a phone, okay? This person had been transferring data from one phone to another phone to another phone to another phone, and this is in 2023. 10 years later, those Facebook Messenger messages are still showing up on the phone because they continually get transferred over, okay? So even old data, even if this data has been deleted from Facebook, it's still possible to get it from the phone itself. And finally, what about all the secure messaging? Well, let's read one that were recovered in forensic software right here. Messages and calls are end-to-end encrypted. No one outside of this chat, not even WhatsApp, can read or listen to them, tap to learn more, but we're looking at it, we're reading it, we can listen to it, right? We can see it right here. That's because when you're talking about encrypted messaging, here's how it works, okay? Here's a message I want to send, and here's where it's going to. I send this message over the internet, over the air, so to speak, till it gets to the other side, okay? So it's going from me to the other person like this. Now, it's unencrypted on my phone, but it gets encrypted and packaged up to be sent across to the other phone. When it gets here, it's unencrypted again, so I can read it. It's encrypted when it transfers across. It's not encrypted at the end to end. So it's not encrypted because it's on your phone, gets encrypted, gets sent across, you get it, and some keys are transferred back and forth to be able to say that they can open it and should be able to see the message because they're the intended recipient, okay? But it's not encrypted. Once it's on your phone, it's decrypted so you can read it. Otherwise, you wouldn't be able to see it. And that's what we're recovering. We're recovering that data in that state from the phone. So it's absolutely possible and accurate to say that we can get encrypted data from a device, even allegedly encrypted or secure messaging applications. That's not true for all applications, but that's true for many, okay, that store the data locally on the device, which more and more places are moving to. Even like Google used to store the geolocation data related to that on their servers, because they got so many law enforcement requests and other reasons, privacy concerns and the rest. They stopped storing it on their servers because they kept having to respond to subpoena requests and warrants from law enforcement, all this stuff to get that geolocation data. So what happened now, it's stored locally on your phone. So what does that mean? That means it's even a richer source and more possible for us to get that data because we can get it directly from your device now. Okay, what about this? A 0-second call. Why do you care? Yes, we can recover deleted chats and the rest, There's a really important point I want to make out here, though. This is a 0000000 second call. What is that? It's like a butt dial or a pocket dial. Okay. Where else would you get this information other than from the physical phone itself? Nowhere. This call didn't last long enough to connect to the cellular system. Therefore, you're not going to have a record of it ever occurring. Okay. So the only place to get activity showing the phone in someone's hand at a particular time related to this call would be to do a forensic extraction and analysis of the cell phone. Here's another example of data that you're only going to get by doing advanced extraction in most instances. And what we see here is a plaintiff who intentionally deleted activity. Okay. So if you have your iPhone, for example, it holds a certain number of calls at all times in your calls. So in this model of phone for this operating system, it always held 200 calls. So it's always 200. It rolls, so it deletes the oldest as you create new ones. Okay. It's just rolling to always have 200. Now, if you have less than 200, like here, we have less than 200, we have 185. That means 15 were intentionally deleted. That's the only way not to have 200 on an iPhone, okay? So we have intentional deletion of all the calls in the times leading up to the accident. Incredible for building timelines, electronic evidence is. I'll give you one quick example that really shows that. In this case example, this is a problematic evidence case example where you want to know the information early. I worked on this one on both the civil and criminal case, retained by the defense on both. Just a ton of problematic evidence because in this case, here's what occurred. The driver of the truck is in Facebook. They click on a link that kicks them out of Facebook into a web browser, and they play a game of what nationality should I really be based on my favorite pizza toppings. So they're answering the questions, this question, that question, this question, what pizza topping do I like, this and that. When they get to the final and they hit to see the results, they go through an intersection, no brakes, multiple fatalities, and extensive property damage. Okay. They were on that phone and you can see down to the second the activity that they're doing all the way leading up to it. And remember, even the searches that you perform, it's not just web browsers. Okay. If you're searching on your phone, as you see here in the bottom right, we have YouTube, we have Chrome on the top, we have Play Store. It also, anywhere there's a search box can produce a record that there's been a search, not just web browsers. The Play Store, look, everything you're going to see is from real cases I have permission to use. I'm not searching for all this weird stuff. There's some interesting things in these, but give you an idea. You see Play Store, they're looking for a application that does fake text pranks on your phone and voice changer. Very illustrative and helpful to know that. Top right, we have Chrome, which is your standard web browser. So yes, we're covering those, but even YouTube, right? Why will we care about YouTube? Why does that matter as evidence? Well, YouTube's a video repository of all human knowledge, right? You learn anything on YouTube. I have a YouTube channel where I teach forensic stuff. It's decently popular for that. Not that popular. I'm not an influencer or anything on YouTube, but I like making them and I share a lot of information about digital forensics on there. Okay. I've had cases, I worked on a criminal case where a guy went on YouTube to search for how to behead your girlfriend before he beheaded his girlfriend. Okay. I had a case where a lady embezzled over $3 million down to a cent from a sporting goods company she worked for. And she went on YouTube to search for how long will I go to prison for embezzling $3 million down to the pennies, right? The exact number before she had been accused of a particular amount of money to steal, showing premeditation knowledge of that, right? So you never know what people are doing on their devices that create all kinds of fun things for us to go and find. Quick example of that. This is a sad case we worked on, retained by the defense. This is the plaintiff. She's a young lady, 17, 18, something like that, riding kind of beside an 18-wheeler, back left corner, something like that. And then what occurs is that the moment she searches for an obituary of a friend who's recently passed away, she hits the truck. She's distracted at the time, dies instantaneously. So sad case, but the truck driver wasn't distracted. The plaintiff was. Now, this slide is really important. A couple of really important pieces of information on this, and I want you to see. Everywhere there's an X is a deleted recovered message. But most important, what I want you to see on this one is in the top right, okay? Two things. One, we have 28,000 iMessages and 13,000 SMS down there that I've highlighted in red boxes. SMS, short message service messages, also MMS, multimedia message services, transmit on the cellular system in an old school way, in a sense that they, can create records in a call detail report of being sent, okay, sent or received. So you will see those in a call detail report if the carrier includes that as part of their package in the call detail records, okay? iMessage does not. iMessage, Kick Messenger, WhatsApp Messenger, Facebook Messenger, you name it. Anything else that transmits via data creates no record in a phone bill or call detail report. The only way to get that is to get it from the actual phone itself if you want the most complete view of it, because you're not going to get any of it in call detail record. If you want it, you got to get it from the physical phone. Super important to understand that, okay? Here's another example of data that can be recovered from a phone. Once again, when you have messages in the databases as they're stored, they're sequential, okay? So if we look at this, we see a big gap. You notice it's like 46, 47, 48, 49, then it goes to 85. What does that mean? That means there were a selection of messages that were deleted, 35 messages in the window of interest, right up to the accident, before and after, we have messages deleted. If you see in the context following, I've been in a wreck, got to go to the hospital, all the messages where they were texting on the phone before they got into this accident were deleted. This is a plaintiff's phone we examined, retained by the defense. So when it comes to collecting and protecting this data, one, I have a guide we give out that has a lot of this information. I'm happy to send it to you, motions, orders, consent forms, and the rest, totally free. We're in the process of developing an entire portal where you'll be able to log in and view video content, download forms that you can just have your attorneys or whoever needs to just fill out with like the get call detail records for various carriers, or if you need, you know, a Garmin smartwatch subpoena language, or excuse me, preservation language, we had that type of information on there that we just give out. So that's going to be there. But how do you get the other people's phones? How do you get the plaintiff's phones and things like that? The best way is usually with just negotiations. We're going to examine data in a particular time range and look at this type of data. Now, when you're dealing with cell phone forensics, you almost always have to get all the data from the phone. We don't have a choice to get part of it. So we have to collect all of it. To get over the privacy and irrelevancy concerns, you say, that's fine. We'll just look at the 10-minute window, 15, 20-minute window around the time of the accident. We'll be able to produce timelines to see all the activity, but we can redact the content. So we can see that a picture was taken, the messaging app was open, a message was sent, whatever else, but we can do it so it doesn't show the content of the text message, doesn't show the picture, so everyone's anonymity and privacy are protected, like the plaintiffs. However, you'll be able to get all the activity of what actually occurred on the device. So that's usually the best method to do that. This is a guide on how to transfer the data from an evidence phone to another phone. If you're in a situation where you need that, I can provide it. I don't recommend this as a first step. Here's the steps I recommend, best to worst in kind of a scenario like this. If you have an accident, if you have a truck driver get into an accident, what's the best thing you can do? The best thing you can do is buy that driver a new phone and then take that phone, put it in airplane mode, power it off like we talked about, hold on to it. You don't need to send it to me. You don't need to have it forensically examined. Just have it held and protected somewhere. This could be in a risk manager's desk, locked up, whatever else. Just have it isolated and protected in case of future litigation and hold on to it. So you're looking at less than $1,000 to potentially save you a tremendous amount of money on the back end. There's no risk of spoliation or other claims like that, or data loss, whatever. Really important. The other option you can do is buy that driver a new phone, transfer the data from the evidence phone to the new phone. If they need all their apps and everything like that to be able to work, that will keep them up and running. Then retain that evidence phone. That's what that guide's for. I'll be happy to send it to you for free. Designed so plain, normal people can use it, not nerds. So it just tells you on an Android or iPhone to transfer the data in a safe way that protects the original evidence. Not my number one recommendation. Second recommendation. Third is the first available opportunity, have that device sent to a forensic lab to have it extracted. That means the phone's still in use a little bit before the time. That's still a good option. Not the best, but still a good option. The problematic option is that driver keeps using their phone until such a time when you know there's going to be a litigation, or there's already litigation, and then you have to get it extracted. That use in the time between can be problematic, okay? Even if it doesn't change the evidence, it creates issues in argumentation as far as the reliability, this data being protected, our seriousness in collecting and protecting the data, so forth, okay? Now, this is from a major insurer that we work with. They're talking about now, they're immediately prioritizing preserving relevant evidence. We get a lot of cases from this particular group, but they do that not only to protect against claims of data loss, but they also do this in order to get aggressively get plaintiff phones. So what they're doing is they're dotting their I's and crossing their T's with their driver's phones and using that as part of the argument to get plaintiff phones, okay? They're also doing some of the other methods we talked about as far as the negotiations and protocols and having windows of time, but they've been very successful in getting plaintiff phones with this method. Now, I'm a little short on time, so I'm going to move forward through this case example, but I want you to know just from this one, without being able to go into it in great detail, this was another case where the Highway Patrol got it wrong. Okay, they did the phone examination and did not get this data, but we recovered what are called KTX image files. And this is one from Snapchat. So yes, this is related to Snapchat. I put a red image over the plaintiff's picture in this one because we recovered actually the messages they're sending from Snapchat, because KTX image files, if you're using your phone, right, and you swipe up to be able to look between your different applications, that's an image. That's not the actual entire application. That's like a picture placeholder. So when you open the app up, it can run, but that way it's not taking up a lot of resources on your phone. But those create timestamps when they're made, so you can see when the application was in use, and it's showing actually what was on your screen at the time. Okay, so really cool, valuable data. And my examiners discovered for the first time you can determine that from a lock screen as well. And in this case, we're able to put this phone in the plaintiff's hand using Snapchat seconds before the accident, based upon those KTX files. Now, this is the last case example I'm going to show you. Then I'll have a few minutes for questions. Understand, the phone is more than just the data generated by your phone. It's a data repository for everything you have connected to it. If you have your CPAP machine that you need to have connected to it, and you need to be able to show compliance that you're using it at night for your sleep apnea, if you're a truck driver, the data from that machine, if it's a Philips Dream Mapper or AirResMed or these other ones, are creating data on your phone in an application that shows your compliance. Did you use it? It'll send you text messages if you're not in compliance. It'll send you emails if you're not in compliance. Hey, remember to use your machine. That is evidence a plaintiff can use, or a defense could use if it's the other way around and it's a plaintiff. In cases like that, it's also getting wearable biometric data and other information. This is a case that I consulted on where you had a cyclist going down a hill. They hit a truck, okay? They hit a truck head first, brain shearing, a lot of damage to the cyclist. Now, the plaintiff said the truck pulled out in front of the cyclist. There's no way he could avoid it, and that's why they hit. The defense was not sure of this particular scenario because it's a wide open intersection, kind of like a California stop, right? Like you could see it as far as eye can see. You can see all directions, so people just kind of slow down and go through it, right? I'm not recommending that. That's just what I've heard anyway about the old California stop. But in this situation, the question was like, how did he hit it? How did he not see it? Well, he had really high-end cycling equipment, a heart rate monitor, the Phoenix watch that you see here, and a Vector 33S. We're going to focus on the Vector 33S. That actually goes on the crankshaft of the bike, like where you pedal, to measure wattage output. Really cool data. So all this fitness technology, wearable stuff has really, really good, precise data because it's made for fitness nerds, and a lot of it's really expensive stuff, especially in the cycling world. Some of the stuff can get super complicated and pretty profound data. But what we're going to see here in this situation is 3 different devices overlaid on top of each other doing the same type of test. So we have that Garmin we just looked at, and then a Power Tap and a Power 2 Max, 2 other devices. So all I'm showing you here is that, see how close these lines are all on one bike in the testing? Very accurate data, independently verified by 2 other devices, so to speak, okay? Now, I can't show you the actual maps or the actual data maps from this for the wattage output from this case. But what I want you to see is that you can zoom in to like a 30-second sprint here. We can zoom into 10 seconds. We can zoom in really close. The important part in this particular case is that that cyclist was hauling tail all the way down, that never hit the brake, never slowed down until the point they hit that truck. Now, what could be the scenario here? I hold certifications like personal training and some other stuff like that. I'm interested in that kind of world. And my layperson with some expertise in these things opinion is that most likely what probably occurred is that he sees this an empty intersection. He's training for triathlons. He gets aerodynamic over the front of that bike because he's timing himself and never looks up, hits that truck head on. A lot of damage to him, but it was an issue most likely of simply not seeing the truck because he had his head down. Now, this was a good outcome for the defense with that data, that additional information about those wearables. And as you can see, a whole wearable technology in these types of accidents too. They're producing a huge amount of very valuable information, and digital evidence is everywhere you look these days. Y'all, I thank you for hanging on to that and all that I just talked about. I'm going to make myself so you can't see me for a second. That QR code there goes into my LinkedIn newsletter. Every week I put out educational articles on different things like how text messages are fake, deep fake video and audio, all types of stuff, this type of content for trucking accidents. So feel free to subscribe there. It's all free. And I'll take some questions now. Let me see if I can pop that up. So the first question is, cell phone data, is it more valuable than black box to a vehicle? I don't know, and I'm not qualified to answer that one. I can say that the cell phone data is incredibly valuable. I am not an expert in the data coming from crash data retrieval systems. There was an expert handling that in that particular case example. We got the data from the cell phone, able to provide that, authenticate that data as good, and they were able to use that in their case. The attorney was to make their point on these verifying each other. We do in-vehicle infotainment telematics data, so we can get data related to like the phones you connect to a car and the CarPlay system, so we can see like locations where you've been, low speed activity, velocity, and other information, but we're not experts in that data itself. So what we do is that we pull that data and then we want to provide it to the right expert who can look at the kind of engineering and velocity data, things like that, to make determinations, because I'm not a biomechanical expert. I'm not a accident recon expert. Our field, we try to stay very much in our lane. Next question, does one brand of phone provide more or better data? Typically, the smarter the phone, the better the chances are it's going to have a lot of data. All phones today produce a huge amount of information. If you're talking Apple versus Android, it's pretty similar. They both have a huge amount of information that's incredibly valuable. Everything we've talked about today is pretty much across the board true for both Apple and Android. Next, are you required to relinquish your cell phone if asked other than by court order? That also, I am not an attorney, do not have legal advice. I'll give you my experiences. Typically, it's by court order or it's a part of discovery when we get the phones. I don't know in what situations you will be required to turn the phone over. I do know that we do work with some SIU departments, and they have either written in somehow, and I don't know the exact specifics, where that person's phone needs to be available for analysis, if so chosen, by the SIU team as a part of the policy, I believe. And once again, I'm getting a little bit out over my skis trying to answer that, just trying to relay what I kind of understand it to be. And in those situations, a lot of times we will go have an examiner on site with that SIU member when they do the interview to extract the phone at the same time. And I think that's all the questions we have right now. If you have a question that you need to ask offline or something that can't be shared, feel free to send me an email. You can get me on LinkedIn at Lars Daniel, pretty easy to find. My website there, larsdaniel.io. Newsletters in the QR code. And then I don't have my email address on this by accident, but you can be able to find me. Just Google me if you need to. Thank y'all. I really appreciate y'all taking time today.
Great. Thank you so much, Lars. That was a very informative session. Reminder, anyone still on the line, the recording will be available within the next 24 hours on our YouTube channel for Rise. So if there's anyone you want to share that with, please feel free to do so. Once again, thank you so much, Lars, for taking your time
My pleasure.
to do the panel for us.